It is a fantastic event. You know why? Because we have the most charming, charming guest with us. I went a little overboard with the intro, so bear with me. He is a beloved superstar and a prolific one at that. Alan Cumming has over 50 film credits to his name, spanning from huge franchise blockbusters to indie films that receive both critical and commercial success. His film credits include not only acting, but also producing, writing, and directing. He also has over 50 TV credits to his name, including PBS masterpiece Mystery, appearance on a Scottish soap opera, which I'm hoping one of the Q&As in the audience will ask him about, a mesmerizingly entertaining talk show Eavesdropping with Alan Cumming, and the hit show The Good Wife, for which he's been nominated for an Emmy. Yes, everyone loves Eli. He has over 40 theater credits to his name, including his role as Emcee in the Broadway hit Cabaret, for which he won a Tony. He's also the recipient of an Olivier Award, alongside over 100 nominations and awards for stage and screen. As an author, he's written articles, fascinatingly fun and witty novel Tommy's Tale, and a beautifully honest memoir and whodunit, Not My Father's Son, which is a bestseller and receiving tons of accolades. Join me in welcoming our guest to the stage, Alan Cumming.
Thank you.
Okay, so I love the fact that this is your day off and you've been out for 12 hours.
Coming again, yeah.
So, hit TV show, Broadway show, best-selling memoir. You're a very busy man. Can you talk to us about Cabaret? Can you talk to us about reprising the role? This is a role that you've done multiple times. What keeps bringing you back to this role of the Emcee?
Well, a variety of reasons, I think. I mean, I did it first 20 years ago in London, and for a few months, this production, and then it transferred to Broadway in 1998. And so that felt like a logical thing. I did it, for a little spell in London, then it was going to be done in New York, so I came. And then, but doing it again this time, I've been asked to do it again many times in the interim period in various places. And I've never wanted to, but I don't know, there was something about, I felt I was a little older, enough time had passed, the world had changed, and I feel that, I think there are very few good, what I consider to be good musicals in the world, in terms of musicals that are, sorry to be controversial so early on, but actually, the only two musicals I've ever done on stage are Cabaret and the Three Penny Opera, so I have a niche, and I'm sticking to it, but I feel that it's really about something. It's about the need for us not to be really vigilant about the potential rise of very terrible and cruel things in our society. And I felt like this year alone, like when we first started doing it, it was about the way that gay people were being treated in Russia before the Olympics and all that. And then since then, many other things have happened that are analogous of it, and then also I also wanted to see if I could do it again. I'm about to be 50, and I wanted to. I don't think many people are going to ask me to be in a kick line again. So it was partly a challenge to myself to see if I could do it. But it was because I feel it really is still relevant and has a lot to say, and also the other thing is that it's not really a character. The Emcee doesn't really interact with anyone other than the audience. And so I really like the way that he is a sort of a Pied Piper of the evening. And so I just wanted to give that another bash.
You mentioned in your memoir, Not My Father's Son, that you don't consider yourself one of those Broadway actors. Do you still feel that way? Do you still feel like you're not? Because I think the audience would probably disagree.
Well, no, I didn't. What I said was I don't feel like I'm a singer in that way. I mean, I feel like, a few years ago, I started to do concerts. I'm holding a mic. I'm miming a microphone whilst holding one. I started to do concerts, as myself. I had been terrified to do that, but actually, in a way, like doing the Emcee, you're thinking on your feet, and you're engaging with the people as not really a character. It's not me, of course, but it's not really a. You don't really know much about him. You don't know he doesn't interact with other people. You don't. But anyway, so I started doing these concerts, and I felt that that would be the most exciting connection I could have with an audience, because I'm singing a song as me. I'm telling a story about my life, and it's been a really great thing. But my biggest worry about doing it was that, you know, when you are in musicals or you're in a musical and you win a Tony for the best actor in a musical, everyone thinks. I was worried that people would think I was Kristen Chenoweth. I don't know, and I should preface that by saying
you get confused on the street.
No, I love Kristen Chenoweth. She's a friend of mine. I think she's absolutely amazing. But you know what I mean? She has a voice that's so beautiful, like a kind of crazy violin, that it's just so insanely perfect. And I don't have a voice like that. I have a voice like a real person, and well, like, you know, a normal person. And so it was a big step for me. What I meant about that was a big step for me to be able to feel comfortable enough that I could. Communicate a song and sell a song, I suppose, well enough just as myself without. So that was why. I think I still don't feel like part of that group, like Kristen or all those big beautiful people, but I feel that I'm interesting enough to do it as myself. I'm interesting enough.
When and where and how did you start acting? Like, where did?
I started acting at school. At high school, you know, an English teacher we didn't have drama as a subject at my school, but an English teacher did plays afterwards. And so in about my 3rd or 4th year to high school, so quite late, I started doing them. And it was, I mean, really, it was because it was the first thing I was ever any good at. And I stuck to it. And so that was why. I'd seen an acting company come to my school in primary school, and I remember thinking what an amazing thing it was. They would come and they did this show in our dinner hall, and I was so intrigued by them, and I saw them packing their trunks up and going in the van to the next school, and I remember thinking that would be a good job to have, but just because I liked the idea of travelling to different places. But the actual thing of acting and liking acting, it didn't happen till much later.
And so how did you then went to school and then you started getting into plays. How did you decide that it would be, because you did plays, you did television, you did film. Where did it start?
Do you mean after drama school?
Yeah.
Well, actually, whilst I was still in my last year of drama school, I mean, I went to drama school in Glasgow, and I feel really lucky that I fell into, I mean, I didn't audition anywhere else, and it was you know, in terms of my book, it was like it was my lifeline to get away from home, but I didn't have a backup plan. And a lot of my friends who went to drama schools in London sort of talk about how, you know, agents would come, and it would be from early on in your training. It would be you'd be auditioning and be in a very commercial kind of worky sort of way. And I really liked the fact that I went to an institution that was far enough away. And in those days, that none of that impeded us. I feel like I was terrible at drama school. I was just awful, and I made lots of mistakes. And that's what it should be. You know, you're not supposed to be a finished, shiny product. You're supposed to be in training. So I went there. But in my last year, I got this little part in a TV show in the summer holidays, and then actually through this, I did a stand-up comedy act with me and my friend at drama school, and then through that, the guy from the Tron Theatre in Glasgow, who then is called Michael Boyd, he went on to run the Royal Shakespeare Company. He asked me to be in a production of Macbeth in my final term at drama school. I played Malcolm, and so I did that. I left college for a bit to do that, and then I did a little movie as well with this great Scottish director called Gillis MacKinnon. So I sort of got a little, head start in my last year.
And if we jump to the mid-90s, you then moved to films like GoldenEye and Emma and started getting into more like broader audience. And then you started, we have a very short clip from what I think is your first film in the US.
It's the first film I made in America. Yeah, first time I played an American, actually.
And it's, please cue the clip for Romy and Michele's high school reunion. We had a much larger sequence, a longer sequence originally, and people were like, it's like, that's half the interview. We're like, that interpretive dance scene. So that's quite an entrance to Hollywood, a helicopter, red carpet, and an interpretive dance sequence that...
I know, I still can't understand why they cast me in that film. I really can't.
Did you have any idea when you were making the film that there was going to be this like cult like following, that there were going to be house parties reenacting this interpretive dance?
No, and actually I still
Right?
haven't. It's funny, like a couple of years ago I was out somewhere at some party with a bunch of friends, and we went back to someone's house, and we were all like, drunk and everything, and they put it on, and they watch it every week, and people like, it's a regular thing, people watch it every week. And so they were like, I was kind of chatting to someone, and it's kind of embarrassing when there's a DVD of yourself on in a party, and I have a DVD of you 20 years ago as well. Hello, and but they would say things like, so Alan, here's that scene when you, and I have no recollection of it. I haven't seen that. I mean, I've maybe seen the film maybe like 3 times in my whole life.
I think all of us have seen it way more than
Isn't that funny?
You're Sandy Frank. Come on.
Sandy Frank. Yeah, I know.
So we were talking about this versatility too, and it's like you've also been a part of huge franchises like Spy Kids and X-Men and Bond. One of the striking characters is Kurt, is Nightcrawler, and he's quite a tortured kind of character. How did you decide that you were going to kind of jump into the franchise, and did you seek out this character, or did they seek you out?
They kind of sought me out. I didn't. I mean, again, I'm really annoying because,
You're like, I was just at a coffee shop, and they were like, hey, you want to transport yourself?
Like, I don't remember the lines from Romy and Michele, and I hardly ever seen it. And it's not that I don't like it. I do, but I just don't want to watch it every week. And with Nightcrawler, I didn't know. I had actually never heard of the X-Men. Isn't that crazy? I didn't know what the X-Men were. I know.
Don't worry, we have security.
And I went to meet them about it, and I remember saying to someone, I saw someone who had been in it, the first one. I saw them at a party. I said, "Oh, I'm going up to meet for some character in the next one," and they were like, "Oh, who?" And I said, "It's this green guy." And I got confused, like, because he's blue and not green. I got confused, and I actually had, but in a way, I think it became very clear to me very quickly how so many people in the world had very strong opinions about Nightcrawler, and it became. But luckily, I wasn't aware of that whilst I was making it, really, and it was kind of just at the time when social media and all those things was becoming really huge. So I kind of missed the onslaught of potential rage that people had about it, but actually I just thought of him as like a person. I thought of him as like, this is what I would be like if I were, if I looked like this and I was religious and I had this, background, and I just tried to approach him like actually every character I play, even if they're not real, even if they're not a human, and often they aren't. I just try and even if they're big in certain ways and complicated, or nasty, I just try and think about what it would be like to just be them and just do it in a very childlike, pretend to be them way, and just do it. And so I did that with him, and I think that's why I didn't have all that kind of baggage on top of me, because I had literally no idea who he was. So
you have a lot of characters that play. You have various accents. You even have various U.S. accents, which as a Canadian I love hearing. But you have various accents, like you just even from the Nightcrawler, from GoldenEye, from the various films that we're going to see after this. Did you learn the craft of doing accents, or are you just a really good mimic?
I don't think I'm a good mimic at all, actually. I'm not very good at all at mimicking people, but I have a good ear. So, and I don't have the patience to be a mimic, actually. But I think when I was at drama school, I went to, as I say, it's called the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. Now it's called something else because I'm so old. The actual institution I trained at has changed its name. But it was interesting. I was kind of at the end of an era of kind of like the people who were training us were from the sort of, weekly repertory days where everyone had to speak with received pronunciation, RP. And so it was drummed into me every single day at drama school that we had to learn to speak with his English accent, and And so I had to have a very good ear to constantly, I mean, and what was weird when I left drama school and started to do TV and stuff, and I, did lots of, cop shows at the soap opera you mentioned. I was playing little Scottish boys my age. I had no concept of what that was like because I'd only ever played people from England going around a drawing room kind of, hey, I just had a marvellous game of tennis and things like that. So it was really hard for me to speak in my own voice. And I think that was a big flaw in my training, actually. But I was very used to having an ear. And I think also what you forget is that in Britain, we are bombarded by American culture. Bombarded. And like 98% of the movies in cinemas are American, and a similar, perhaps less than that on TV. But so practically everyone can do a passable American accent. So it was, I think that's what helped me as well. My good ear and the bombardment.
The bombardment. So, we talked a little bit about the versatility. You have been in, it's very humbling how many plays and films and television shows. You then went into the foray of directing. And we have some clips from Anniversary Party and from Any Day Now that I would love to show so that we could kind of jump into that.
I didn't direct Any Day Now, though.
Yes, no, you didn't
direct that. I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, it's true. He didn't direct that. Travis Fine did. Yeah. So if we could cue the clip for Anniversary Party and Any Day Now. Phenomenal performance. So let's first talk about the Anniversary Party. So you and castmate Jennifer Jason Leigh decide that you're going to make this film together. At this point, you have both been directed by a lot of different people. How did the two of you decide were there influences? Did you think of filmmakers that you, and kind of the approach to filmmaking that you wanted to follow, ones that you wanted to avoid at all costs?
Well, yes, both. Basically, Jennifer took over from Natasha Richardson in Cabaret when I did it in New York the first time, and it's like funny now. Like Emma Stone's just come into it, and I really love Emma. But actually, our rehearsal together for her coming into it was like 15 minutes. I introduced her twice, and we really have no interaction on stage, and that was what was funny. And during the course of Jennifer's time in Cabaret, I went off to Italy to make the film Titus. So I saw it even less. Woo, Titus! I saw her even less than I would have. So basically, when she finished, we stayed friends, and we always said, it would be great to actually properly work with each other sometime. So she went off to Africa to make a dogma film. Remember those Scandinavian loopy things, and it kind of was loopy. And but there was just at the start of digital video and all that stuff. So basically, we decided that she was excited by the way that the freedom you had. So we just made up this story. It was really for us to try and work together a bit more. And then we made up this story that we wrote for very specific people. All the characters in the film were really written for these actors who played them. And in terms of our approach to directing, it was very much about the good things we'd learned from working on so many films and the bad things. And I always think that every atmosphere on a set, any business actually, any corporate thing, it all stems from the top. If the person at the top is decent and kind and generous and treats people with respect, then that everyone is happy to come to work. If people are not really feeling that they're valued, they don't like coming to work. And so that was something that you can see that very obviously on a film set, and especially when you're like a movie star, everyone kisses your ass. So but you're working with people whose asses are not being kissed. So unless you're stupid, you can really see it. And so we made a concentrated effort. Also, the other thing, I think the rise of the director as God, I find is a terrible, terrible thing. It's happened in the last sort of half of the last century. And so in a way, being two directors, I'd done a play once with two directors and a movie with two directors. And I really liked it because there being two people, immediately it opened the circle because they had to have a conversation and you could join in with it. And I thought that was a really good way to debunk the kind of this one person knows all the answers, when they just don't. How could they possibly? And yet they pretend to if they're dicks. So Sorry, but so anyway, we really did, you know, and even just in the way that we involved the crew, and everyone got, you know, the actors didn't have trailers. There was a house next, but we did all these things that we thought were obviously budget things, but also we wanted to make sure that everyone felt good about coming to work. And I think that was the biggest lesson we took from all our films we'd made and used it.
Well, you had a huge ensemble cast too. Like, they could take you. There are a lot of actors if you were a jerk.
Yeah.
Part of the scene that I thought was so on point for this evening is the struggle with, you know, whether it's fiction, whether it's true to life. It's a novel,
Yeah.
and Tommy's Tale, your novel, gets a cameo in this film. Can you talk to us a little bit, especially when we're going to talk later on a little bit more about the memoir, but this whole idea of, you know, you initially said that Tommy's Tale wasn't, you know, part of fact, and then you wrote a new foreword for the new novel, saying, like, you know, whoops, turns out.
Well, that's
in
not
retrospect.
true. That's slightly being malleable with the facts there, young lady.
Who are you calling young?
What I said was, like, at the time I was so aware that, you know, I was an actor writing a novel, and it seemed like it was me, and it seemed like my life, or people's view of my life, and it wasn't. I mean, the story is not my life at all, but all the things that happened to that, I use a lot of things from my life in the character, and I use some of the people in my life and kind of imagine situations that they might all be in. So, and I think every writer does that. Yeah. But when you're famous, people know things about you and that you might not know about a real writer. You know what I mean? A not famous writer, or a writer who's not famous for being something else other than a writer. So I thought it was unfair, and in the end of Tommy's Tale, I write myself a happy ending. There was about 4 or 5 real people that I based characters on, and the one person that I wrote myself the happy ending with is the only person who's not in my life now. And so and we broke up just as the book was coming out, and it was dedicated to him. And so I was when I did all the press for it, especially in Britain, I was so sensitive to everyone just saying, you know, all this stuff about it just being a thinly veiled memoir, because it wasn't. It was a novel. But when it came out again this year, in the light of my memoir coming out, they republished it, and I wrote a new introduction to it, and it was really fascinating to read it again and go back to it. And of course, I was able now to say it was a thinly veiled memoir. It was about. It wasn't. But it wasn't like, it was still a novel. But all of the things that happened to Tommy are things, you know, and some of the relationships in it were similar to things that happened to me. But it wasn't. I wasn't ready to be that frank yet. And so it's been an interesting journey. Like, you know, in the anniversary party, that was before Tommy's Tale, I'm screaming at Jennifer, "It's a novel!" And when I would do the press for Tommy's Tale, people would say all these things, and I'd say, "You know that scene in the anniversary party when I scream, 'It's a novel'?" And they go, "Yeah." I go, "Well, it's a novel." So it's kind of interesting that but I think, you know, the most things I feel most proud of, and the things that are most successful to me in terms of my connection with an audience, whether that be via the keyboard or my voice or my acting or whatever, are ones when I am being most sort of no veil, most open. Yeah. And I think actually just in acting in general, as I got older, I've realised there's a reason why you look at some people on screen more than others, and I think that's because you can see them, the person. Even though they've got a funny moustache or a thing on, you know, you actually know who they are, and or just something about their spirit they're allowing to come out. And that's what I think, I've tried to do over the years, and in my acting and in my writing, and then now this book has been like the kind of, you know, sort of pinnacle of that, because I think I've shocked people by how open and frank I've been.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the candor in your memoir. It was striking to me if the first few pages that you just totally outed Patti Smith as a spiteful spitter on stage, and it was amazing. But you also have this candor and total open and honesty about really, really terrible things that happen and terrible memories that you have from your childhood. And how were you able to be so candid, not just in the memoir, but also in life, not be so guarded, because you do seem so open and sincere and willing to be vulnerable. And if you were raised to not show any emotion and to be punished for that, how did you break free?
Well, actually, that thing you said there about being prepared to be vulnerable, that's what I think acting, being an artist is about. I think that's really what you have to be prepared to be, and for it to be successful. So there we are. But in terms of, like, the boy I was when all this happened, I mean, the book's about a summer in my life. Will I do this now? Why don't I? It's about a summer in my life, 2010, where I was about to do the TV show, Who Do You Think You Are? They trace your genealogy and they find out fascinating things about someone in your family, and you cry. And they focused on my mum's dad, my maternal grandfather. He's called Tommy Darling, and in the course of the program, all I knew was that he had died in a shooting accident in Malaysia in 1951, and what I discovered was that he'd never come back from the war. He'd never come back home, and I couldn't understand why. And I discovered that it's because he was separated from my granny, and one of my uncles was not his son, and I discovered that he died playing Russian roulette in Malaysia. Yes. And then at the same time, just before I was about to do that, my father, who was estranged from practically everyone he knew, actually, but from my family, my mum and my brother and I, came out of the woodwork. I'd not seen him for 16 years. The last time I saw him was when I went with my brother to confront him about the abuse he'd doled out to us, physical and mental abuse. He was very violent. It was 16 years before. He contacted my brother and told my brother to come round and tell me I was not his son, hence the title of my memoir. And so I was going through this thing of finding out about my father and about this whole other, shocking series of revelations, at the same time as being filmed, finding out about this other shocking thing of familial revelations. And so, in a way, the book was a result of that summer, because I just couldn't stop talking about it. It was such a crazy series of things. I couldn't believe it had happened to me. And I have always felt that since I was a little boy, or since I was an adult, and since I had started to become famous and started to have to deal with the press and stuff like that, there's no classes for that at drama school. And you just have to find your own way, and you are actually more vulnerable when you're younger and starting out, and you're more likely to say things that are then going to come back to haunt you because you've revealed perhaps too much about yourself. And that did happen to me. But then I thought, well, it's true. Why am I being scared of certain? And then if you're coy, certainly within the British press, you invite speculation, and that means people coming around and rifling through your dustbin, trash cans. And it affects other people in your family. It affected my father. The whole reason my father told me when he did was because there was a reporter outside his door. It's just one of those things that I, over the years, not just because of that thing with the press involvement, but as a reaction to many, many things, I find the best way is just to be an open book and to just say what I feel. And it's also to do with shame. If you're not ashamed of anything, why would you hide it? Why would it not be all right for everyone to know? So that's the way I have navigated it all, but I'm now a very different person to who I was when, in the book when my father's hitting me and being horrible. So that's, I in a way then I had to absolutely quash my feelings, and any joy that I had, I particularly had to hide from him, and I had to just go into a situation and completely read him, and how soon was I going to be hit? How likely was I going to be hit? What mood was he in? So I learned different skills then. And as I grew up, I was able to let them go and just be kind of free.
You started this process of writing in 2010. How long did it take you to write it, and how did you end up deciding that it was going to be a memoir and not a play, or not a fictional novel, or not a You know, how did you decide?
Well, I actually before this all happened to me, I was actually starting to write. I wanted to. Over the years, I'd wanted to write a book about, you know, things that had happened to me in my life, and not horrible abusive things, but just sort of, you know, I've had a really fascinating life. I think I've met really interesting people, and I've learned a lot of interesting lessons from people, and I just wanted to, you know, I write things down, and I tell good stories, I think, and so I thought I'd like to write a book about that, not a kind of oh God, you know, I'm fabulous, I've slept with so and so, I've, you know, but a kind of something that had lessons I've learned from that, and just, you know. So but I had a couple of occasions when, you know, after my book, Tommy's Tale came out, and people would say, oh, what do you want your next book to be? And I would sort of say that, and they're like, how about, you know, more showbiz gossip, you know? And I was like, oh. So then I was thinking again, years went by, I was thinking again about this. I'd written some things, and I was thinking about getting maybe a collection of short stories, I suppose. And then, you know, about me, about my life, about my truth. And then this happened to me. And so I thought, if I want to write about myself and my life and show, I guess what I wanted to do was show really what my experience was. And I do feel I'm like an outsider to my own life because, you know, I didn't come to America at all, or I actually came to Canada first before I went to America. I didn't go to America until I was 30. And so I've had a whole life that's completely alien to the one I have now, which I think is a very healthy thing. P.S. But I just felt there was, like, you know, it was kind of interesting, an outsider's point of view, and so if I was going to do that, here was the story I had to tell, because it really it was a page turner. I mean, it's like funny when your life is a thriller, because it really is. The book does read like a thriller, because it just went on and on and on and on and on, and more crazy things happened, and you know, I'd sort of go and talk to my father about the fact that he was telling me I wasn't his son after not having had any communication with him for nearly 20 years, and you know, it was, and then having a conversation with him when I actually said, this is the last time we will ever speak to each other, and stuff like that. You know, it was a really intense. And then he died, and then other things happened, more things happened, and it was intense. So I just thought, and then also partly, like, you know, such a crazy thing to happen to you, series of things to happen to you. In some way, you want to expunge it from your being. And I felt that writing a book would be a good way to do that. And it has expunged it, but of course it's brought it right back to me. I mean, but that's been my biggest epiphany about the book, is that I knew I wasn't going to, like, you don't end something by writing a memoir about it. You place it in a different place. And what's kind of amazing is that my father's right here. He's right beside me right now. I mean, he's not like a spirit standing here. He's not like watching me. But I mean, I feel he's very present in my life, because I'm talking about him all the time, but he's present in my life on my terms. I've told the truth about him. I've told what a monster he is. And so he is here because I've invited him back, and he should be here. He's my dad, you know, he's half of who made me. And I think that's been an amazing thing for me, to write this book about some horrible things, and to feel more, and for my mum and my brother too, we all three feel very, much more kind of at peace, and yet more involved with the past.
And is it that moment of being at peace that you were able to have so many moments of humor as well in the memoir as well? Like, you do, you know, you are able to stop and have moments where you...
I think I've always been like that, though. I think I'm Scottish, you know, the dark humour is kind of in our DNA. I think we that's how we get by. And I mean, it is kind of bleak, some of the parts, but actually the book has got quite a lot of funny bits, and ultimately I think it's quite a hopeful book. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to read a bit?
Sure.
Should I read a bleak bit? I'll read a bleak bit first. And then I can read a funny bit, because this Patti Smith spitting incident is worth it. So this is a bit about when I was, you know, I have this really great editor called Carrie, and she sort of asked me to try and think. Well, shit, I'll just read it. Memory is so subjective. We all remember in a visceral, emotional way, And so even if we agree on the facts, what we said, what happened, where and when, what we take away and store from a moment, what we feel about it, can vary radically. I really wanted to show that it wasn't all bad in my family. I tried so hard to think of happy times we all had together, times when we had fun, when we laughed. In the interest of balance, I even wanted to be able to describe some instances of kindness and tenderness involving us all. But I just couldn't. I spoke to my brother about this. He drew a blank too. We remember happy times with our mum, safe, quiet times, but as a whole family, honestly, there is not one memory from our childhoods that is not clouded by fear or humiliation or pain. And that's not to say that moments of happiness did not exist. It's just that cumulatively they have been erased by the dominant feelings that colour all of our childhood recollections. I remember us all in a Chinese restaurant in a nearby town. We hardly ever ate out together, so when we did, it was a memorable occasion. But there is something nagging, too, about my memories of that place, something that jabs at my heart when I think of it. I know that at least once in the few times we went there as a family, I must have been hit for some flaw my father perceived, must have tried to hide my tears and humiliation from other diners. We surely had some meals there that were free of his mood swings and his tongue and the back of his hand, but they don't stand out for me. I can remember when I was very little in the living room at Panmure, that was the country estate we grew up on, he was a forester, at least 4 or 5 years old, playing horsey with my father. I see him balancing me on the foot of his crossed leg as he watched TV, and him bouncing me up and down to my squeals of delight. I remember being genuinely filled with joy in those moments. But as soon as a memory like that settles for too long in my mind, another, darker one forces it to slide to the side. I see a freezing wintry afternoon in the sawmill yard. I am on the red bike I was given for Christmas. Excuse me. And my father has decided that today is the day that I must ride it without training wheels. To this moment, I have never once tried to ride without them. There is ice and snow on the ground, and I see my father taking the training wheels off and pushing me down the driveway too fast. Every time he does so, I panic and fall off, and soon he gets frustrated with my failure and pulls my trousers down and slaps me really hard on my bare bum. It is so cold I have no feeling in my toes and barely in my fingers. It is sore for me to sit down on the seat. I am scared, I am crying, and yet somehow my father thinks I am going to be able to achieve what he has decided I must do. Each time I fall, despite my pleas and promises that I will practice and be able to ride without the training wheels soon, I am bent over his knee, feel the blast of freezing air around my genitals, and then severe, painful slaps to my behind. I don't remember how it ended. What I do remember is my mum washing me and getting me ready for bed in front of the living room fire later that night, and her gasping as she saw the ring of blue, black and purple bruises that had appeared. My father came in to say goodbye before he went out for the night, and my mother admonished him for his handiwork. "He's all right," he said, running a comb through his hair as he looked in the mirror. "You've gone too far, Ali," my mum replied as he disappeared out the door. She was on the floor.
So you talk about your mother and your brother often. Yes. In the memoir, in interviews. Tonight, you talk about this blurring of memory. Would you sit and talk with them through all of these kind of experiences? Did they help you write this? Did they remember or misremember or remember differently?
Well, I mean, when this was all happening, we never talked about it, and it was a completely silent existence. When my dad wasn't there, we might, commiserate or say stuff, but it wasn't until and I write about this in the book, it wasn't until I was 28, and I was trying to be a father myself, and I had this nervous breakdown precipitated by, I think, trying to be a father and remembering and all these memories that I had suppressed, and my brother had suppressed too. I think that's what you do. I think it's just a sort of survival technique. You just are too young to process the horror of what's happening to you, that you just ignore it. But it's somewhere. I talk about it being like a box in your attic, and eventually the box explodes, and it exploded when I was 28, and I lost it. And it was then So, I mean, many of the things in the book I didn't recall at all until I was 28. And then I remembered them, and my brother and I talked about them when I'm with my mum. My mum was, had left my dad. But we'd all escaped from him by that point. And so then, over the years, we would talk about it. But that was that's when my brother and I went and confronted my father about what happened. And that didn't go well, because then he didn't get in touch with us for 16 years until he called me and said I wasn't his son. So, but during the course of writing the book, they didn't really, I talked to my brother I would speak to them occasionally about things I was, trying to remember details of. But mostly I did it on my own, and then I let them see it right before I handed it all in. And they were incredibly supportive. My mum had a few wee changes she wanted me to make that were actually very much about protecting other people, including my dad. And my brother just cried. I was with him when he opened the envelope, and he cried at the title. He's a bit of a crier. In fact, so am I. But and they've been incredibly supportive. And I really think they've, my mum was nervous about it coming out. I could tell. But the best review I got for this book was like about a month ago. She called up and asked if she could have 10 more copies sent so she'd give them to her friends.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Thanks.
Yeah. You mentioned that you also wanted to read another moment.
A cheerier moment.
Yeah.
This is like the night before the revelation happened, the first revelation. I was... I'll just shut up and read it again. Thursday, 20th of May, 2010. I'm standing on the stage of a huge marquee that houses the Cinema Against AIDS Gala in the gardens of the Hotel du Cap, just outside Cannes. I'm looking out at a sea of rich, tanned, chatty French people, all sipping champagne and gossiping to each other and ignoring me and smoking. I should point out that I'm not alone on this stage. I am flanked by Patti Smith and Marion Cotillard, and the three of us are just standing there and absolutely nothing is happening. Luckily, nobody in the audience is paying any of us any attention at all, and it feels like we are trapped in celebrity aspic. Suddenly, the reverie is broken by a sheepish voice that turns out to be my own, saying into the microphone, sorry about this delay, ladies and gentlemen. We're just waiting for Mary J. Blige to return to the stage so we can auction off a duet with her and Patti. Patti Smith's head whipped round towards me so fast, I actually felt a draft. Panic made her eyes seem even more otherworldly than I'd remembered when she'd passed me on her way to the stage earlier in the evening. Right now, she was the spitting image of one of those girls in The Crucible, fresh from a hellish vision. What? She spat. What would we even sing together? No one told me about this. You may not know it, but Patti Smith is prone to spitting. I first met her at a party in a New York clothing store a couple of years earlier. She sang a few songs as cute young people in black milled around serving canapes and champagne to less cute older people in black. It wasn't very rock and roll, but then Patti changed all that. In between two of her songs, she spat. Not an, oops, I've got a little something stuck on my tongue kind of spit, but a great big throat-curdling gob of a spit. A loogie, as they say in the Americas. And she spat on the carpet several times. No mention was made of Patti spitting by anyone in the store, least of all me, when I was taken to meet her after the performance. As we were introduced, I could see Patti sizing me up rather suspiciously with her Dickensian eyes. You're the mystery guy, aren't you? She said, pupils widening in recognition. What? I said, a little overwhelmed. You're the guy who hosts Masterpiece on PBS, aren't you? She said, as though she herself were one of the TV detectives I did indeed introduce as Masterpiece mystery host. I was just processing the fact that Patti Smith was an avid viewer of Miss Marple and Co. when she dealt me another body blow. I've always wanted that job, she muttered wistfully. I made a pact with myself right there and then never to tell the Masterpiece people this information, as they would surely bump me and make Patti's wish come true. Can you imagine Patti Smith coming out of the shadows in a black suit, spouting forth about Inspector Linley or some malfeasance on the Orient Express, and ending each introduction with a resounding gob into a specially designed PBS spittoon? I can. It would be a lot more entertaining than that bloke in a suit with the funny accent they have on now.
So good. I'm so glad you chose that excerpt, because I remember, you know, I was thinking, and I knew a little bit about this memoir, and then it starts the first 20 pages in, and you start, and it's like, you're just outing Patti Smith, and then you out that like Mary J. Blige is late, and then you like this whole thing, and it sets this tone. So you're constantly playing with that in the structure of this memoir. Once you think you're getting the rhythm, you're like, no, and then you restructure it.
Well, I think that's because that's what the story was like. Well, I thought, okay, this is happening. I'm dealing with this. I can deal with it. Then all of a sudden, like, whoop, no, something else happens. And, you know, and just like, you know, later on in the book, the TV show has come out. That's been insane because of all this revelations. And all the stuff with my dad. And I decided to have a screening of the BBC show in New York and do it as a charity thing for this post-traumatic stress disorder organization, because I think, you know, I not just think my grandfather definitely had that and was not treated, and I just thought that'd be a nice thing to raise some money and blah blah blah. And I said at the start of the screening, you know, introducing the charity people, and they're talking about it, and I said, for me, it's been this tonight is some form of closure. It's been a crazy summer, and I'm able to show my friends this thing, and we're going to do some good and blah blah. That night, I went home, went to bed. I woke up, my father had died that night, and so it was more closure than I had anticipated, and things like that just kept happening. And so in a way, the structure of the book is dictated by this, you know, every time I thought it was over, another thing would happen. And it kind of still is. It's still going on. Not, I mean, I'm more in control of it, I have to say. But you know, even this weekend, my uncle and aunt, my father's brother, wrote to my mum and said, "We are so sorry we read Alan's book, and you know, my dad had told them." Okay, anyway, it's just, you know, it's still, I mean, in a way, that was like, that's right there and then is a good reason why I should have written this book. It's brought my uncle and my mum back together again.
Mm-hmm. And I have no other way to transition this other than we want to have you talk about your experiences of now choosing, because you're writing this memoir while you are doing while you're doing films, while you're on The Good Wife. How did you find, you know, you spread this out through years because you're doing it through other kind of projects. How did you?
I remember actually in Any Day Now, that clip you saw, I had a meeting with who then became to be my now literary agent, whilst I was shooting that film. Like maybe even on that day we shot that scene, actually. Those were night shoots. Yeah.
Wow. So the final clip that we wanted to show before opening it up to the audience with Q&A is a clip from The Good Wife. So we're going to show a clip from The Good Wife, and then we'll talk a little bit about your foray into this TV series.
What will it be?
I don't know about you and your workspace, but we quote that all the time.
Really?
All the time. You have the best lines on this show.
I do. I know, it's great, yeah.
So you already had all these other projects in the work. How on earth did you decide that you would commit to doing a television series?
Well, I didn't. I mean, it was kind of an accident, another one. I just sort of, what happened was, I felt like I was just traveling all over the world. You know, it sounds like, oh, boo-hoo-hoo. Traveling all over the world, making movies, you know, it's a nightmare. But I kind of thought it would be quite nice to, and it was at the start of that time when sort of, you know, there's been this move, like in a way the independent film industry has gone to television. Like quality drama is in television now, mostly. And it was the start of that kind of thing, and people were starting to do television. I thought, oh gosh. And I actually thought, wouldn't it be nice to be in a television series in New York, where I live, so I would be able to be at home for a bit more. And it really was. So I put that word out to Team Alan, and And then
I just picture them all in T-shirts.
no, white lab coats. Clipboards. I should get them that for Christmas. That'd be hilarious.
That's awesome.
And they anyway. So there was a couple of things I thought, oh, this sounds good. They're like, no. I was like, oh. And then this came up, and so it was about 2/3 of the way through the first season of The Good Wife, and I had seen it on bus stops and stuff, you know, and I knew Juliana a wee bit, and I was aware of it, but I'd never seen it. And frankly, you know, they asked, it was one episode, and it came, and I was in the middle of making a film, and it was going to be weird with the dates, and you read something that's a complicated story like that very fast, and you've got to make a decision very quickly. I was like, you know, who's this guy? I don't understand. Who's she? Which one's that? And I remember I had people over for dinner, and they were calling in. I said, I just pass, because it's not going to work out the dates. They're never going to let me off the movie. Blah blah blah, and just say no. And they were like, we really think you should do it. We really think you should reconsider. I was like, no, I don't know. And they said, we really think you should. And I was like, well, if you want to make it work with the other friend, yes, it'll work. Just do it. I was like, all right. But it was really like that. And I remember I'd have the call with Robert King and Michele King, the amazing creators of it. And they were talking about the character and la, and I had it on my head. I was shopping whilst I was doing it. I was in this shot, and I remember going, oh yes, so it's based on Rahm Emanuel. Like, oh yeah, that's interesting. Yes, like that. I was totally being a brat, and just thought it was like one episode of a thing. I was kind of doing it, you know, to be dutiful to my... But then, you know, they were absolutely... I mean, sometimes you wonder why you pay such gargantuan amounts of money to these representatives of yours. It's because sometimes they make a really good call. And I would have turned that down. I would turn that episode down, and I would never have done The Good Wife. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's, I mean, and for many, many reasons, it was a great call on their part. And then, so they did it, and I never went... I kept doing it until the end of that season, and then the next season I became a series regular. And the rest is history.
It is history.
And I love him. I really like him. I mean, I don't like him. I love playing him. I think I wouldn't really like him very much in real life.
So you were saying that he was already based on a character, but were you able to shape him at all?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit like, you know, with good writers, I'd not really experienced that before, but it's kind of like a game of tennis. You know, you get something they give you, and you kind of, you know, lob it back to them, and they're like, oh, he's taking that in a different direction, and they give you something else. And it's been really great over the years. I mean, I think I've reached this sort of plateau an interesting plateau where the audience knows so much about what Eli's going to think about a certain thing before he even appears on screen. And like, I love that. Like, it's actually really good to be a character that's talked about a lot when you don't have to be there. I've always liked characters like that, because you can be at home and, you know, you're still very present in the movie or in the TV show. But so it's an interesting thing. And also, I think in a funny way, the fact that people know that that Alan is not like Eli, and because I've got a presence outside of him, that I think people, I was thinking about today, it's almost Brechtian that I am commenting on Eli by just me being him. You see what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's an interesting thing. I think my coming to it with other stuff that people know me from, they're like, oh, how is he going to play this? And I think that's I've really enjoyed that. And so now I like the fact that, I mean, sometimes I sort of think, oh, I wish they would give him, you know, other stuff to do. I feel like, you know, I don't know that I could do more things with my eyebrows than I have over the last 5 years. But I just, you know, still enjoy him. I was just shooting on Tuesday or something. A hilarious scene, and I like him best when he's stressed out, and luckily he's stressed out most of the time. Yeah.
Do you think you'd ever be able to get a spin-off? That would be incredible.
Oh yeah, people said that. I don't know that I'd want to do that. I don't know that I think he actually works best as being the kind of, you know, side story to. I think that's what his value is of not always light relief, but an energy that is sometimes counter to what's going on in the main story, or sometimes he's the main story and other things. But people have said that, and it's very complimentary, but I don't think I'd like to.
It was so hard for us to pick clips, and we had, you know, a bit of a cage fight to pick which one we would do, and then this one was just hilarious because we quote it all the time. I'm like novice. We are now going to open up the conversation to all of you. There are volunteers with microphones, and I'm not sure if they're going to have the lights go down or if we're just or up or. So whomever has the microphone first, I still can't see. Go ahead.
Hi. Over here.
Hello.
You mentioned your niche on Broadway, and that
That sounds like Sean Connery saying niece, doesn't it?
I love that show. I do.
You mean my niece Evie? Yeah. What about her?
And that it's revivals, and it makes me curious for you as a filmmaker. Film is a realm where to remake something is scorned, is taboo, is just immediately dismissed. For you, what is the difference? Why is one so accepted and one pushed away?
That's a very interesting question. I think perhaps because when a film is, I don't think there can be a definitive play. You know, I think that the very nature that it's done in a theatre with a different group of people every night and a different group of actors over the years means that it is open to interpretation. And when a film is perceived as a classic, it's because it is a finite thing. So it's like you're digging up a corpse when you go to do it again. You see what I mean? Whereas in a play, it's almost like that door is always open. You know, I think any play, if you're a writer of a play, you would hope it was going to be revived. When you're a filmmaker, I don't think you hope your play is going to be remade in 20 years' time by, you know, some whippersnapper. I have done a couple. I think I've done one remake, and it wasn't as good as the first one.
Whomever has the microphone next, you guys lead us the way.
This is like Lord of the Flies. Yeah. I have the conch.
Yeah,
exactly. It's me.
That's why I'm having them do it. So
Hi, hello. I won't ask you what's going to happen to Keriagos, but if you want to tell us, you can. But more seriously, your range and versatility is incredible, from playing Eli Gold on The Good Wife to a one-man show of Macbeth on Broadway, which was mind-blowing.
Thank you very much.
Et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything that you haven't done that you want to do?
No.
Aside from everything? No? You're done?
I mean, I don't yearn. I'm not a yearner. I feel that sometimes, you know, there's lots of things I'd like to do. There's lots of projects that are interesting to me, but I feel that it's just, I open my heart to the world and things come to me that are, you know, now and then there's something like a film I really want to get made, or actually Macbeth. I really wanted to do Macbeth, but not the way we ended up doing it. That was a complete mistake. I mean, it was great, but it was not, I mean, you know, I didn't think, I want to do a version of Macbeth that will nearly kill me. But I don't sort of have these things that I think aspiring and yearning and really, really wanting things as an artist sometimes means that you're not in the present and you lose touch with why you're doing it, and I think ultimately you're always going to be disappointed. And Carrie, you know, his hair gets cuter. He gets anally probed. But that's just at the office, not in prison. Are we over there for the
next question? Yep.
Well, as an aspiring actress, I was wondering, how do you deal with rejection? Like, it must be hard to deal with rejection as an actor.
Where are you? Can the man point the lead person point the red thing at you? I can't see you.
As an aspiring actress, I was wondering, how do you deal with rejection?
You know, to be honest, I don't get rejected very often. I mean, I have been, you know, it's been a long time that I've kind of, I mean, I know it sounds arrogant, but it's true.
I was waiting for this teachable moment from Alan Cumming, and instead it's like,
there's a point. But I'm in a very different, you know, I'm a lot older than you, and I'm also, I'm not going for, I've got a full-time job, and you know, I'm not going out on auditions all the time. But many years ago when I did, I do that. I mean, it's sort of like something I write about in my book. I think my mum told me I was very, very precious. My father told me I was very, very worthless. And so in my mind, even at a very young age, I decided that I had to make up my own mind about myself. And I felt that I must be somewhere in the middle. And I think it's the same way I take that about critics and things like that and people's opinions of your work. Some people say you're fabulous. If you believe the good reviews, you have to believe the bad reviews too. And so in terms of rejection, I think you can get very upset about it. You can choose to be, especially if it's something you really wanted. But there are lots of other mitigating factors about why you might not get that job. And I think you just have to keep understanding that and know yourself, your worth, and just keep believing in that. See, I pulled it together.
Yeah, you brought it together. You brought it together. Where is the lightsaber? Okay, yep, up there.
Hi, Alan. Great sneakers. Love them.
Thanks.
You had mentioned that you first came to the States when you were 30, but you were in Canada beforehand. What were you up to in our beautiful country? Were you doing community theatre or Stratford?
No, I came to the Montreal Film Festival. Actually, that was in I made a movie in the first sort of feature film I made was a film called Prague, and I made it in Prague I think in 1991. So I think in 1992 it was at the Montreal Festival du Film du Monde, and I came to that, and that was my first time in Canada, in North America, but in Canada, and I had a lovely time. I really loved it.
Yeah, right there.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, Mr. Cumming. It's really nice to have you here. You have been in countless films and plays, and like in The Good Wife. Your performance is definition of roller coaster of emotions. It is true. So where did you learn that kind of acting? Was it in drama school, or you were just born to be a talented performer, or it's an experience from your life that you start now showing this to us?
Well, I think it's a combination of all things. Like I think obviously I had some talent when I started to do plays at school. I noticed that people responded to me in a certain way. I felt like I'm better at this than other people. I went to drama school. I got certain training. I got better at certain things. Got to practice a lot. But ultimately, I really do feel that, the weird thing about training early on is that you need to train in your life as well, because most of the things that you're playing, even if you're not playing real people or humans, you're drawing on human emotions and experiences and interactions you've had with other people and feelings, and that's often those are not fully developed because you're young. And I think as you get older, there's certain actors, of course, that are great from early on. I wasn't one of them. And I think perhaps maybe some of the roles I played early on were too difficult for me, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't open enough to be them. But I think as I've got older, the more open I've got as a person as well as an actor or an artist in general, I think it's got better. So I would always advocate people training, because I think it means it gives you time to screw up and find out what you like and what you don't, and have not a place not to be judged. But I also at the same time I think you can't really teach acting. You can't really teach, and that's why I think like you can learn certain skills, but unless you can play, and like kids play, I really think that's what it should be like. And I think like things like the method are the death of acting, and I really do believe that it makes it all very insular and selfish, and it's kind of means that you can have great performances but in a vacuum, and I don't believe acting should be a vacuumous pursuit. Thank you. That's my my members of the Actors Studio out the window.
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it me? Oh, it's me. Hi. Hi. 2 questions. Number 1, was there a character that you played that was really sad when you finished playing that character, when you were done? And number 2, your favorite book as a child?
A character that was very sad Oh, that I was very sad about not stopping playing. You know, no. I mean, it's always funny, like at the end of films or plays, and people are crying and like going, "I can't believe it's over." I'm like, well, why not? You knew when the schedule was ending. I really do think that's weird. I mean, there's you miss certain people but I do think that people. What's great about getting older is you realise that you're going to come. The other night I did this miniseries I did years ago in Canada called Tin Man. Neil McDonough, who was in it, he came to see me in Cabaret, and he came out. I've not seen him for years. It was lovely to see him, and I felt so close to him, and we've talked about old times. That happens, and people come back into your life, and you have that bond you had with them. You have a very, the great thing about acting, I think, in terms of friendship and stuff, is you have this incredibly intense and artificial bond. Sometimes, I mean, it's artificial because you get to know someone really quickly. Sometimes you're like naked with them after a day of knowing them, a morning of knowing them. That kind of, you leap a few steps in the friendship game there, and then you don't see them for like a year or 2 years or something or longer. But then when you see them again, like in life, when you've had extreme and intense, beautiful experience with people, that will never go away, and you'll always be able to go back to it. So that's what I like, and that's why at the end of things, I'll miss people and I'll miss certain places and things, but I always think everything has it's like a piece of music, it's going to come to an end. And so I don't think there's really been any character. I mean, doing Cabaret now, I've actually been thinking that when I finish it in the end of March, it's going to be weird because I'm never going to play this character again. I've played it over a period of 20 years. Holy shit. And I'm not in 16 years' time, I'm not at age 66. I'm not going to feel calm. So finishing this run is going to be an interesting thing for me because it's not just, I've done another play and I've had a lovely time and blah, blah, blah. It's actually going to be, I'm never going to do this thing that has been so much part of my life again. So I think that might be the first time that it will be different. I've also said that when they do the revival of Cabaret in 20 whatever 16 years from now is 32 is it something what 2030 thank you. I will play Fräulein Schneider because she's older and she's got the best songs. And then what was the second part of your question? Do I childhood book? I really loved the Famous Five. Those I loved by Enid Blyton. I just loved all those. There was mysteries, and there was always underground caves and things that potentially could happen where I grew up. I grew up in a very rural area, and they always had bits of chocolate handily and bits of string and things in their pockets. And I sort of longed to have their adventures.
So I've just been given the sign that we have time for one more question. So make it good.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm kind of going to switch gears from the entertainment perspective to your writing. I actually happen to be a member of the Family Violence Lab at the University of Toronto, and we're researching fathers and kids' relationships in traumatic.
Every student should read this.
Well, I'm thinking of using it as an ethnography in our ethnographies, using storytelling as a means of research.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, sorry. My brother begged me to come here tonight because I should be working on my dissertation.
Is that your brother?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So I was wondering, what do you feel is your message to these children undergoing this experience? And as I'm listening to your speech, I'm like, I'm totally doing trauma-focused psychotherapy right now with you right now in your mind. So what would you tell these children who have had a similar relationship that you had with your father?
Well, I think, the interesting thing about this book, the thing that is the most fulfilling but surprising to me is the reaction that people have had to it in that way. And I think that, I am detailing a really violent, horrible, familial situation. Really, I should have been taken away I should have been taken into care. It was really that bad. But actually, what I have found is that everyone has a dysfunctional family. I think the word dysfunctional is kind of irrelevant in front of family, because everyone's is. And so, yes, I've been really moved by people who've had a similar thing to me, and they've said that I've helped them by speaking out. talking about it, and it's made them feel more, they're not alone and more secure, and for them to be able to talk about it within their family, all really great things like that. But also people who haven't had anything near that range of circumstances, but also can relate to it in terms of just what's going on in their family. It doesn't need to be violence, but there's always power games and problems within any group of people who are just in the same house together for years, I think. So that has been a really amazing thing for me to have, and something that I didn't really think I would encounter on such a large scale. But what I would hope people would take away from it is that this is an uplifting story. It's a story about survival. And my brother and my mum and I came through we might not have survived this. I mean, literally, as well as figuratively. And we did. And we are very happy and very strong and very full of love for each other. And I think that's what I hope people will take away from it. That if there are kids, or not necessarily kids, people in an abusive relationship that you think you're never going to get out of, I thought that too, and I did, and it can be okay. Thanks. Is that it?
Thank you so much for your honesty and for celebrating your career with us. And everyone, the book signing is taking place now after this event, and then immediately after, Alan will be back on stage for Eyes Wide Shut. Please join me in thanking him for this onstage conversation.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you. Cheers.